headlines. Let's get into the media issues now, and what better way to start than to ask whether journalists learned anything from the federal election. We know the media spend a lot of time debating whether this person or that party took any lessons from the result, but what about so many journalists, the overwhelming majority of them, all of them at the public broadcasters who got the election completely wrong? They missed the leadership changes, the issues, the policy contests, the trends, and they missed the result. Just like they missed Brexit and the US election, and they've misread border protection and climate politics for a decade or more. Well, let's drop in on yesterday's ABC Insiders to see what they've learned.
Cranky at the climate activists, they're cranky at some of the global institutions. They've been cranky at big business in recent times. They're cranky.
Yeah.
To what end? What's the message they're sending here?
Well, it's...
Who are they sending it to?
Well, the government presents as a government that doesn't like criticism.
Yep, 4 left-of-centre commentators in furious agreement about problems with the coalition. The mob, they said, would be history. They've learned nothing at the ABC. Not a thing. No diversity. Fine commentators they might be, especially my cousin Mark, but they're all of similar political disposition. And the ABC continues to take our tax dollars while thumbing its nose at the charter that demands objectivity and plurality. As it happens, the former Insiders host, Barry Cassidy, has been made an adjunct professor at Melbourne's RMIT University. Just by the way, these unis only ever give these gigs to journos from the left of centre, don't they? Anyway, Cassidy gave a speech last week to mark his new role, and it tells us plenty. The former Labor staffer and former ABC host was a bit down on the world of politics, saying it's dangerously adrift, drifting away from fundamental decencies, from well-established political norms. Now, if you've been around for a while, you'll recognise this trend. When the left are ascendant, politics is fine, the system works. When the left loses, democracy is in strife. Consider this, Cassidy went on. The Labor Party in Australia has now won a majority of seats in the House of Representatives, where governments are made and unmade, a majority just once in the last 26 years. He goes on later to say, so why? What happened? What's going on? He's in mourning. Cassidy is distressed about Labor losing, and he surmises this must be a crisis for the country. He went on to lament the influence of regional Australia in our politics and hyperventilate about climate alarmism and the usual derangement about Donald Trump. Remember, Cassidy was one of the ABC's leading commentators right up till the election, and they'll probably throw a few more dollars his way yet. But in his post-election funk, he also blames the media. Not the ABC, of course, but media that pays its own way. News Corp, for example, Sky News, has a particular business model, says Cassidy. They've chosen to corner the conservative right-wing market and champion that market. Well, yes, Barry, if you run a business, you'd want to have a model and a market. But that doesn't explain how the ABC can take more than $1 billion a year and ignore the mainstream people who fund it. But get this, Cassidy says one of the problems started 10 years ago when News Corp publications started running non-journalists as opinion commentators. Many of them don't respect journalism as a profession, and they don't mind obsessing about rival journalists and publicly attacking them professionally and personally. What a classic insider. The problem, as Cassidy sees it, is non-journalists getting a voice. Oh, the horror. My colleague Paul Murray was onto this last night.
When you keep it to official accredited members of the club, when the commentariat is only journalism, well, the left would be in the ascendancy. Once you open that up to mere mortals being able to have an opinion, the right becomes in the ascendancy, a little bit like the country that seems to vote that way quite frequently.
Yep, this is yet another example of how the Green left, the so-called elites, the so-called progressives, are not only completely divorced from mainstream Australia, but they have disdain for it, and they spend our tax dollars looking after their own.